This episode of A Beacon of Hope is proudly brought to you by Campfire Studios. To find out more, visit campfirestudios.co.nz. 2, 3, 4. A Beacon of Hope is a weekly podcast that shines a light on the human spirit and explores the power of hope in our lives. Join me, Will Fleming, as I talk to people from all walks of life about where they find hope and how they use it to navigate life's challenges.
Be good, be safe, and be happy.
In this episode of A Beacon of Hope, I chat with James Ferrier, a visionary entrepreneur and environmental advocate. James is the co-founder of BioFab and is on a mission to revolutionise the packing industry with sustainable mycelium-based alternatives. This is a podcast about connection to the environment, to ourselves, to each other. James, thanks bro for making time and catching up again. I said before we started recording that me and you have talked most of our time on microphones.
Yep.
Which is weird, but kind of cool.
Yeah.
I think it suggests how busy you are in your area and how busy I am, and that we need to have the cameras going to force us together. Quickly, before we get into our chat today, 3 quick questions. What is something that you are most proud of in your life?
Proud of like the family and friends that I've got. I have a really, really, really strong network and connection with them, and it's definitely like the source of why I'm happy now. And I feel like it's something that I always try to remember. It's like, you know, happiness isn't something that happens when or if something happens. And it's like knowing that that's there now. I think the biggest source of that for me comes from sort of my family, and it's like as you continue to learn more about it as well. It's not like, you know who they all are, but hearing stories, you meet someone else that knew your granddad and you hear some story that they did together or something like that, and you're like, oh, that makes me proud, you know? And I think that's definitely one of my biggest sources of being proud, and which gives a sense of, you know, feeling of confidence and ability to achieve things.
Awesome,
so it's a
bro.
massive source of power to draw from.
What's something that you believe in strongly and why?
I think I really believe strongly in innovation and I don't even know what word to put to it, like free market. I don't want to use the word capitalism, but like the idea of, you know, problems or opportunities to solve. I'm definitely not someone that does what I want to do out of some sense of purely just fear of like, we have to do this. I'm a big believer in like, now we can do these things because they can actually make change, and it's regardless of any reason for why we need to. I believe it's just something better and we can do it. So I kind of say, and I think that that's a good mindset to have, you know, because it keeps a bit of enjoyment and passion in why you're doing something, instead of just thinking like, I care about this problem. But then sometimes you can think like, oh, stuff it, like I'm just one person. You know, it's an easier mindset to give up if I do something based out of fear compared to, you know, just doing it because we can.
And what is one of the biggest challenges you've faced, and how has it changed you as a person?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Like, I'm very grateful about the life that I've had, and I've had a lot of privilege, and I really try to use that as like a springboard to do better. I mean, like what I'm working on right now with BioFab has probably been one of like the biggest challenges, just in a way, because I mean, it's starting any business is a big challenge. And I feel like, you know, I chose not to go down this traditional path, or what felt traditional for me at the time of, you know, go to university, get your degree, do this, do that, and all these steps are lined up for how to achieve success. Taking that path of not doing that, you know, you ride these ups and downs of, am I an idiot? Like, you know, should I have done something differently? But even still, with all the problems and challenges that we have, like I've been sitting here reflecting recently on how 6 or 7 years down the track of probably changing my path, I feel really confident that, and at almost that peace that even if, and I never normally think this way, even if we don't succeed with this one venture, that I've now learned enough knowledge and experience that it's been worth it. I feel so confident to be able to still do something that I love, whatever that may be. So yeah, I think that's like, probably one of the biggest challenges right now. That's just trying to, raise money for a startup, especially with everything going on in the world. COVID, money tightening up, even all this SVB bank stuff happening in the last couple of days and how that affects the startup world. There's constantly challenges thinking, but I think I'm definitely got a pretty good mindset of like, every challenge can be overcome.
And at the core of your business, what are you aiming towards? Because I want you to go into BioFab, but I don't want us to get lost in this kind of, Silicon Valley talk. And even though I think that's really interesting, and even though I do put you in that category, when I watch your LinkedIn post, it's very targeted to like, we're doing meaningful things from a business point of view. But, I get the sense too, from my conversations with you, from hanging out, that there's a deeper level here where you really are trying to contribute something positive. But if you were to answer that, what are you aiming towards?
Yeah. Well, we spend enough time pitching to investors where we probably don't get to, say what we're really doing it for, because it can sound distracted or not fitting into that 5-year return model that they're looking for.
And should we put a pin that's a problem, eh?
Yeah.
People investing should give a damn about why.
They should. And but I totally get it as well. Like, I think answering that question, which we can go into later, is like, I've definitely changed my mindset to that from a few years ago, which was purely frustration. And now it's like I understand it better, because a lot of the time these investors are held by their investors, and that can even be held by investors above them. So it's definitely not actually the people you deal with day to day, where although they act a certain way, I get it a little bit more now. They've got a job to do. But the big mission that it's kind of working towards is understanding and unlocking the unique value within fungal species and the impact they can create. We're really looking at like what we're doing as an opportunity now, which is a lot of what we pitch we're doing, is still just a step to achieving this, this thing that will be bigger than just us. It will last longer than our lifetime. And hopefully, like, our goal is to act as one of many companies, but as a catalyst towards the growth of the impacts in industry, environment, and people and culture that can come from the whole world of fungi. And I sort of like, when I talk about that as a big goal, it's like, we look at like these 3 big categories of life. We've got the animal kingdom, which is us and animals, and there's the plant kingdom. I still actually need to go and check with someone who really knows where insects fit in all this, whether that's a 4th one. But the whole world of fungi, or the kingdom of fungi, is something that is, there's more species of fungi than plants on Earth, and we just know relatively little about them. And some people have described it, I wish I could coin this, but it's not my saying, that mycology is a neglected mega science. And there's this idea of, I can talk about all these different examples of impact that could come from certain innovations, but at this high level, to put it in one point, it's just fascination and mystery that I know that there's a shitload that we don't know. But within that, there's going to be some really, really interesting things to discover. And it's sort of like, as you know from our previous chats, like the mysterious mystery, like, all of that type of stuff just gets me so excited about just, and that's what innovation is for me as well. It's just like, R&D, as someone described, is like you're spending money, you know how you're going to spend it and what the outcome's going to be. Innovation is just like you don't know what's going to happen, and sometimes it's about just hoping you make a wonderful mistake along that journey.
Wow, the wonderful mistake.
Yeah.
So when we talk fungi, I think it's relevant for pop culture because The Last of Us has come out.
Yep.
Obviously, I don't think I'm spoiling him, am I? Where the zombies fungi driven?
Yep.
But what do you mean when you're like fascinated with fungi as something like a medicine? Is it something where we can grow coffee cups?
Yes. Well, I guess from a more tangible, there's material development, which is sort of like what we're working in, and what the company Ecovated that we work with out of the States works really broadly over. So that's like composites to replace hard to recycle plastics like expanded polystyrene. They're producing pure mycelium for high performance phones, nappies, makeup applicators, things like that. They're producing meat-based alternatives and, ones that are classified as whole foods, not a bunch of processed stuff just mixed together. There's the area of sort of medicines, all the way from, I've heard about stuff that's got hot during COVID of taking fungal species that produce a common compound for treating things like the common cold, feeding the saliva of your patient to it, and it then targeting that compound to the individual, so targeted medicine, all the way to what's happening around the world around looking at these, psychedelics and psychoactive plants for use and clinical use of treating mental illnesses, PTSD and things like that. There's a ton of benefit there, and that's actually being backed up by research. Soil health, remediation of soil at an oversimplified level. It's like that bacterial and fungal ratio in soil is really important for the health of it. Now, we've had this sort of farming industry that's been focused on, giving things to help the plants grow faster and bigger and stronger. It doesn't necessarily take into account the soil health, and that's where we should be targeting for good plant growth, because the first option is also depleting the nutrients that's in the soil and killing all those microbes and things that add to that. So those are some of those real tangible things that are happening, like materials, medicine, soil remediation, but there's also like the greater level of what does mycelium represent, and it's like it embodies something that we want to see, throughout all other areas of life, connectedness, it's showing how all things are connected. It shows, in my opinion, like a really strong example showing intelligence in nature. That starts leading into almost like spiritual, philosophical sort of thinking. And how can that, by adopting these things, how does this culturally and socially change people and populations by just simply using it, getting fascinated by it, and then asking these questions about it? How does that change things? And yeah, there's just so much. And, radiotropic species, the idea of how, life gets seeded between planet to planet. Like there's so many areas that fungi can touch and have interesting conversations. So
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
And when you am I kind of right here that part of what you're doing is seeking funds so you can keep researching and developing the findings of this whole other universe? So
there's that being our bigger picture. Like our main part of the capital raise now is to build a commercial scale plant of these mycocomposites. So that's kind of focused on, one really targeted segment in that really shotgun spread approach of mycelium and fungi that I just talked about. That's why we're focusing on, building a business model, because, you've always got shots, early stage businesses of raising money, people giving it to you, but you've got to get to a point where you've got a profitable business. And the whole idea of generating that profit is so that we've got spare dollars to spend on that research. So, that first plant, it's about providing a return on investment for investors in a shorter term period. It's about giving us founders some income so that we can live and work on those slightly more selfish aspects that we need to focus on. But the real big vision is that it enables us to achieve that larger goal of working in this research space around fungi, particularly focusing on native and endemic species of fungi as well. We've got New Zealand is just so separated from the rest of the world, and we've got really unique flora and fauna here, and we've got a lot of better protections over taonga species compared to other nations as well. And that's kind of meant that we've been this kind of untapped treasure in terms of natural resources. And, again, we hope to do this. We're not doing this just to discover value in terms of an economic sense. Like, we also hope that we can be a great example of doing it responsibly. Working with iwi and hapu to do this in a way, bringing them involved, and as we are all custodians of the land, but taking I'm a big believer in that, adopting indigenous knowledge around fungal species and how to do business. It's not like a tick in the box that I think some people think means that you got to take compromise or taking a step backwards. Like, I'm a big believer is that taking all the good stuff of modern and also combining it with thoughts of the old together, that's the 1 + 1 = 3 to move us forward.
James, why do you think like this? Because if I hear you talk, you could quite easily be helping raise capital for, whatever.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm saying whatever, like the other capitalist type ventures that we see, like AI is really big at the moment. I don't think the science is, or maybe public opinion is clear if it's better or worse for us. We've got AI is basically driving our
it's here though
neuroscience in terms of what we look at, why we look at it. We had Di Henwood sitting here before you saying that, it helps us think of everything else but now.
Yeah.
There's no mindfulness because we've got these algorithms which keep us in this other state. Why do you give a damn how fungus works, how it can implement and connect us? Excuse my French, but why give a fuck?
Yeah. Well, I think people especially wonder that when I tell them that I'm a 3-time uni dropout rugby player as well. No technical background into all this, but I think it's surprisingly less like, amazing as to how I got into it, because it was coming from there's the aspect of family came from a lot from the wool industry. So I think that's where I talk about, the interest in natural fibers being in my bones. Then there was my old man running his packaging business, industrial packaging, engineered packaging. Me naturally falling into those opportunities that were kind of there for me. Went into packaging very quickly, wanted to do, at that time, and I'm doing earmarks here, sustainable packaging. Being frustrated that there wasn't, these solutions that were out here weren't some silver bullet that was being sold to us. And I got really sort of worried, but again, saw the opportunity of the term compostable or biodegradable falling into the same bracket we like recycling is now. Lots of things, not everything, but lots of things are technically, they really are technically recyclable, but what is actually being commercially recycled is a much, much smaller number. They say anywhere from 2 to 12% of global plastics actually get recycled. So I got really worried that same term was happening to compostability. There are these materials that genuinely are compostable, but the reality was it was only in a very specific commercial compost environment. They don't add to the quality of the compost, and commercial composters were in the business of selling high quality compost. And as a back of the napkin calculation, I was like, you can only add PLAs, these current available biopolymers, at a 5% ratio into compost. What that essentially would mean, if we expected them to be composted and we hit an inflection point of 10 or 15% of global plastic switching, that we'd probably have to start cutting down trees just to run the compost machines. And that didn't feel like that was the direction things should go in. So sitting there, I was just like, I sort of felt a little bit hopeless because I put all this time and energy of being like, I can leverage all of the opportunity that I've sort of been given or been very fortunate to be in a position to access through family. And, but it was focused around being a trader, an importer. What was available in those markets that I could import out of wasn't cutting the mustard. And then I was just like, the only way that I can keep going down this path of something I'm interested in is jump higher up the supply chain to more material development. And there was some times where, I thought like, there's no way I could do that. The 3-time uni dropout rugby player, front rower as well. So not known as always the smartest in the team. But I think it was just like sometime, and I think this is all of the stuff I've done around mindfulness, wellness, meditation, art of living stuff and things like that have probably developed these traits of just like living in the moment. And it's like learned a lot of it through, my very lucky to get exposed to some of the high performance side of rugby and sports psychology and things like that, where they all teach you to be in that blue moment. There are times to reflect on the past, to learn, and there are times to set intentions and goals in the future. But when you're actually trying to do it, it's about being in that state. And trust that the billions of things going on in your brain that you're not consciously aware about are actually really efficient at driving you towards that. And try to staying too aware about every decision you're making. You're not using the full capacity that you've got to give. So yeah, I think that was probably why I didn't think that I couldn't. If I spent time worrying about it, I probably would have landed on that conclusion. And I just trudged ahead with what I thought, this is just what I've got to do. And then I think, it was, mate was setting up the industrial hemp business, felt right to get involved with that. Like I didn't know what exactly yet, but I just had a gut feeling that to gain opportunity in the material development space, like hemp was going to play a big potential in that as a raw material. And then 6 months later after that came across the mycelium composite technology. And then, had my hand up in this presentation for literally 5 minutes trying to ask the guy talking about it, being like, have you tried growing it on hemp? Have you tried growing it on hemp? Literally didn't answer me. My hands sort of hit the table with a bit of frustration. And then as he did that, he said that hemp is one of the best growing substrates from it. So that was that kind of like the genesis point of BioFab. 2 hours later, decided I wanted to start a business in it after hearing that. It was that aspect of, really trusting my gut that this was, hey, Jimmy, you put a bit of your money where your mouth was. You trusted your intuition that this is the space or a direction to move in. And I was like, this feels like, the universe giving you a bit of an opportunity. And I was like, don't let this slide. And it also just sounded so interesting.
Absolutely. And, you fascinate me when you talk because you're someone that, in my mind, which I wish to be like, believe in an idea and go and raise money and then go do that and have a solid output that can be measured.
Yep.
But James, you talk about things like gut feelings and universe guiding you. This is not words that we hear Zuckerberg talk, for example.
Yep.
They're like robots.
Yep.
So you truly believe in that? You truly believe?
100%.
Yeah, but break that down because there'll be people like, hey man, you're giving me hope, but why are you not just being bullshit gurus?
Yes. Well, it's a, God, where to start with this? Because it's like there's so many things that have happened in my life that I think have built, it's a collective kind of set of experiences and knowledges that's been given to me that I think collectively like make me think this way. But if trying to pin it down to like a couple of like things was, God, where to start with it? So, and I guess this is where I feel like to explain I have to go through the process of what happened because I can't just sit there and say, I had a spiritual experience and it led me to try to think this way and now I'm impacted that way. It's too conflicting for my left and right side of my brain, to not explain the steps of what happened. So we were, after the funeral, after we had a mate pass away from a skateboarding accident about 7 years ago, we are back at our friend's house. There's around 8 of us there. Now, as a bit of context, which will make sense in a sec, the house that we were at, our friend whose parents' house it was, we had picked him up from the airport because he lived in London the day before. The old man and the sister hadn't been at the house for at least a couple of weeks. And that will make sense in a sec. So we're all in this one room that he's got. And we're all reminiscing on old times of our friend Penny. And it got to this point where a memory got brought up where everyone in the room was present at the point from when that memory was created. So we all remembered it. And as that got brought up, unintentionally, and none of us can remember exactly how long it was, whether it was 1 minute or 10 minutes, it all sent us into like this moment of silence and almost trance or meditative state. And I think we just all went into this state of coherentness, synchronicity, of what we were talking about before with non-locality and the quantum entanglement in any way applies to memory and thought. It felt like there was some, entanglement happening there around that thought. And the thing that broke us out of the moment of silence was we looked up to our left and to our right, sitting on each side of the room. And above the fireplace, there were these like 20 electric candles. One of them was suddenly on. And now we had these things at home and I'd taken a fascination in them before. And I knew that they either sit on like a always on or like a 2 hour and then a 6 hour timer. So it was on I don't actually remember what setting it was on, but it definitely wasn't on. We didn't notice it was on when we got in there. If the timer had been on, it would have switched off between someone being there 2 weeks prior. But we all had this sort of fuddy feeling about it. It was like, was that on when we got in here? Like, we can't quite remember, but that was a bit bizarre because we've all just felt something and we were acknowledging that. But that wasn't that crazy yet. Second, what happened was that all of a sudden, as we're kind of becoming aware of this, there was this noticeable drop of temperature in the room. Hairs on the back of the neck stick up for everyone. Goosebumps. A noticeable breeze in the room as well. And again, we're sort of like, oh, like, that's a bit weird. A couple of the guys that were a bit more, I think, frightened. Probably just out of their relationship with death or what they saw in movies. And we're like, well, guys, did you feel that? And again, 1 + 1 = 2 brain kicks into action. And I'm like, okay, let's look around. It's like, there's no aircon unit in this room. It's like it's a glass room, and it's all the windows are shut. And I literally go up and physically check them. The door to the room back into the inside is open, but I'll go and look out and all the other doors are shut. Again, nothing could really logically explain this, but probably explainable. Now, the third thing that happened, which was the most profound part, was, looked up at the roof, 3 sets of 3 lights just start going absolutely bonkers, like flashing on and off, really intense. At the time, I personally got a really warm feeling in my gut about this because I'm like, okay, this is getting to a point where it's getting hard to explain now. I've got this weird feeling in my gut as well. That's going to mean bugger all to the people that are like purely 1 + 1 = 2 driven. Couple of my mates, white petrified. And again, talking to them afterwards, it was definitely essentially what they'd seen of ghost stories or their relationship with people passing in their life. And that caused them to be so frightened about it. And I think back to year 9 circuitry, and I'm like, okay, everything in a house is wired in either in series or parallel, but essentially the reason why that is done so that you don't have a diminishing level of power output to each light in a circuit, because it'd look pretty weird if every house, when you walk in, it's super bright, and by the end of the house, it's super dim. So I was like, if this was a power surge happening outside of the house, you would see every light flashing in the same rate, pattern, and intensity. And because I asked people in the room to sort of, hey, are you guys seeing this? I explained that to them. And we're looking up, and it's just completely random and different intensity that all the lights are flashing at. And again, these are just trying to explain the logic process of what was happening. What you can't explain, but was the really profound part of it, is the additional feeling that was there. And this gets into like the gut and intuition aspect of trusting your gut in scenarios. And, but by this stage, we're all convinced that something is happening. And a friend of mine then brings up, this is really interesting, because just as I was about to hit the flight mode on the plane, a video popped up on his phone, and it was someone interviewing, Joe Rogan. And it was him, not on his podcast though, and it was him talking about many things, but the role of sort of spirituality came up. And what came up was the role that DMT, dimethyltryptamine, as a hormone in the brain, and its relationship to spiritual or hallucinogenic experiences came up. And as he's talking about this, now these lights are still flickering above us. It's calmed down a little bit, but if I was to describe it from what I really feel was happening, it felt like the presence of Pin was still in the room. And Joe Rogan makes the sort of the statement that that DMT can allow sort of like a chemically induced death process to allow the spirit to leave the body before we die without actually dying. And it was as he said that, it was like all the lights from their random flickering went to sort of like this poof, high intensity, and dimmed back down to normal and stopped flickering. And it was seriously like a lightning bolt hitting me in the chest, being like, look more into this as a role for its role in explaining this experience that you've just had. Now, as batshit crazy as that might sound to some people, it was an experience that I couldn't forget. It sort of drove this deep interest to try and find out what had happened from a rational standpoint. And it led me to find all this research about the role that, this this hormone or this compound DMT can play with these experiences. Bunch of fascinating clinical research that was done by the Institute of Mental Health in America by a guy, Rick Straussman. Really fascinating interview with him on Joe Rogan in the last year. They talk about the process of how they slightly kind of blurred the lines when they went for funding what they were actually researching to get it over the line, because they wouldn't have got it funded otherwise. But they got this approval to research the role that DMT plays when people take it. They said that they were just going to be testing heart rate and things like that, but what they were really interested in is understanding, what happens when people have an experience on this. Part of their interest into this has been looking at all the stories that come out of people that take certain plant medicines, ayahuasca and things like that, and how that there's this very similar experience that people have. And they were sort of like, well, that's interesting. For all these individual unconnected meat sacks, how does this sort of one plant provide this sort of unifying experience that is similar each time? And so when the research happened, they got, I think, a couple thousand people that had no experience or experience with psychedelics and everyone in between. And essentially, out of all the people that got studied that had what was deemed as the out-of-body experience, and again, when I say that, it's a pretty well-researched sort of field, out-of-body experiences. The Monroe Institute in America is a really interesting place to start looking at, again, some of the what people might call proper research that has happened around it. From naturally induced things as well, of achieving these out-of-body states. But anyway, so this research on DMT, people have this out-of-body experience. They have this quite similar experience where they meet always like a female figure that takes them to somewhere else that is not the hospital bed that they were administered the DMT in. They have these amazing experience, roughly along the lines of you get shown, your past, your future, and how the actions you're taking now can affect that, both positively and negatively. That's a really simplified overview of it. But and it's in the doctor's notes by Rick Straussman saying, and it's one of the common bits of information that everyone seemed to bring back was explaining how they were shown or told or have a feeling of how everything is connected. And they were told in a way where these people were now left absolutely sure that there is this fundamental nature to reality, to the universe, to life, that everything at a fundamental level has a way of communicating with each other, is at the core of it. And what was really interesting that they pointed out in this research was that DMT as a molecule or as a compound, the base molecule of DMT was tryptophan. Tryptophan is one of the 4 common amino acids as the building blocks of organic life. I've tried my best to obviously go and validate this for people that are smarter with me, and they're like, well, we're not agreeing with the claims that you're making, but they're like, but yes, these are fairly well understood things about tryptophan being a common building block of life. And for me, in my gut, it just felt interesting that we've got this molecule, tryptophan, and we've got this compound DMT that most forms of life, from plant life upward, have the internal chemistry to be able to synthesize DMT out of tryptophan. That when people take this compound and they have a hallucinogenic experience and they're shared information by something else, that a common bit of information that comes back, they get shown how everything is connected. And that experience comes from something that is very close. It's only one molecular step away from tryptophan that we know is in all living things, or at least we haven't tested all living things in the universe, but from what we know, that's a sort of a relatively strong statement. And that for me just felt like thinking back to that experience of and there will be some shockingly strong biases here, and probably me trying to, wanting this to be true. And this is the whole balance of, following your gut, the difference of actually following your gut or your heart versus following your. But I felt like I was following my gut and following my heart, and that this made sense of heart, here is a little bit of modern scientific sort of research or claims that seem to back up the slightly more left field, observation. But anyway, that itself enough for me to go and think like, hey, there's something to this. Did a bunch of research because I didn't want to jump on a plane and fly to South America and go do an ayahuasca journey or ceremony. Did a bunch of research around how, found some research around how they were acknowledging that when we produce theta waves on our way down to delta as we fall asleep, these are brain waves that we pick up on machines and computers, not waves of energy. And that when you are in theta state, that you naturally produce a small amount of DMT, out of the pineal gland, and that is responsible for vivid imagery, is what the sort of the mainstream science would say, or dreaming or dream states. And that there was, other research showing that through meditation or achieving altered states of consciousness, that you can remain more conscious while you're in the state of producing theta waves. So that was what led me on to thinking, well, meditation could be a way of safely experimenting with trying to produce slightly high levels of DMT within the brain without going and doing something that would be seen as a little bit more of, at least in a Western context, an extreme way of doing that. So that what drove me initially to have this interest, and then, was like, okay, meditation takes time and practice. That then led to one of my first startups, which was doing the flotation tanks, which is how we first met, working with Anton from Float Culture. Then I was convinced that, okay, floating can be a way that is, it can be, because I wanted to start a business around this interest. And I was like, okay, well, building the foundation of a business on the idea that I'm trying to get people to experience high levels of DMT within the brain isn't really a sound business model. That was a deep passion that was there. But obviously some of the things that came into play through research was that, hey, there's such things as corporate wellness. Businesses are spending money on improving the state of wellness of their employees because they're finding that's directly related to productivity and output. Now, it's not that my interest was to allow corporate to gain more productivity out of their staff, but if that was what could be the foundation of a business model and a profit model, but it wasn't too conflicting that it's like, okay, that makes sense. There's a problem that we're solving for these group of people. I was absolutely sure that it was going to create positive benefits for the user, the employee in this corporate wellness sense. So it felt like, well, here's a business model that could tick my weird, wacky, wonderful spiritual side of me. It's got a grounding in what I think was going to be just a ability to build a business, and also had a research potential as well. And I was like, well, great. I feel morally fine. I didn't feel morally fine trying to tell people to go and through plant use, go and experience this type of stuff. But I felt fine with telling people to jump in a float tank for an hour in a week. There's going to be a ton of benefits of just relaxing, all the magnesium helping release sore muscle tension and things like that. There were all these other benefits that I was happy with. And it meant that I could feel happy trying to start a business in that without sacrificing my moral and ethics, just selling something for the sake of making money. But there was always that at the back of my mind that's like, can this take me a step closer to trying to understand this mystery of the non-physical, if I was to try to describe it broadly. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Bro, this is like a full-on Joe Rogan podcast. All we haven't talked about is aliens.
Oh, and they can come into it if you want.
No, we'll save that. So here's what I'm hearing, and let's tie this back to hope. That when I think about hope, you put out a signal. That's why I've called it a beacon of hope, because I really hope that if someone puts something out, that it's received. And what I feel like you're trying to do in your fascination with understanding, it's not the connected bit, it's the bit where something's connected but you can't see it.
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't think that's too far-fetched.
No.
I think the answers probably are in fungi.
Yep.
And, isn't there an M. Night Shyamalan film where all the trees talk to each other? Don't we actually know that trees talk to each other? Anyway, if we can get some more science around things communicate without a physical connection all the time.
Yep.
That might help bridge some of the other language around these experiences, because all of our brains are being conflicted when you're talking.
Yes.
You're like, that's probably something, and maybe the thing was left on or not.
Yep.
But either way, you're on this journey.
Yes.
And I think it's cool. And your journey is leading you to Aussie soon. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
And what you're off there to amplify your own story?
Off there to amplify it, and and one quick thing just to sort of wrap that last bit of conversation up was I think it's kind of a mindset thing, how we talked about the butting heads of science and religion. And I feel like a lot of these experience sit within slightly more to that religion or spiritual aspect than modern science. But a great thing that I've heard someone say was that any sufficiently advanced enough technology or understanding is indistinguishable from magic. And it's this idea, because this is what sort of drives me as a belief of not, letting these far out things being, at least sounding, trying to communicate to others, not too far left field, is that, 200 years ago, if someone caught you talking on a cell phone, you'd probably be burnt at the stake for being a witch or something like that. And it's like all of these bits of technology that seemed impossible until it wasn't. And that's what I sort of look at these things. I'm just like, I know they sound crazy, but the fact that they sound crazy by itself is not an excuse not to look into them, research them, or for there to be truth in it.
Yeah, and, you'd like to think it's true that when you put a prayer out, for example, or hope for someone or a positive thought, that collider you were talking about, that the other one can sense it on some level.
Yes.
I'd like to think that's true.
Yes.
That people can pick up on a frequency that you're talking and incorporate something into their life.
Yep.
It'd be cool if it was.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced.
Yep.
I think life might just be cruel.
Yes. Yep.
But I'm here to advocate for something in between religion and science.
Yes.
That is like, you embody that. And I think it's cool because when you're asking for money, it really asks you to prove what you're doing.
Yep.
And so, dude, the adventure continues, and I want to thank you for jumping in here with us. Quickly, where can people follow your website?
So website is www.biofab.bio. And obviously LinkedIn is probably like the main source to see how I talk about the business. We've got Instagram and Facebook as well, which can just be BioFab NZ. So anything around that to start looking up, what we're doing. Innovative Design, a great website to go to look at all the technology that's happening around microtechnologies and whatnot. Joe Rogan interviews with Paul Stamets is a great starting point for some of the mycelium and fungi related stuff. Does a great job at bridging he's very similar driven in the sense of like he's doing some really amazing on the ground, tangible, real scientific things, but he's got this big draw to the unknown around it as well. So they're definitely some great things to start exploring this whole space.
Keep us in the loop, bro. What you find, let us be the ones who can help share it.
Yes.
That'd be awesome if it wasn't TV1 that had give us the exclusive.
Well, and the one thing I would say, because I'm a shocker at this in time of going so far afield, I probably haven't said exactly what we do, which is providing sustainable solutions to expanded polystyrene and other hard to recycle plastics for packaging and construction use. So if you're out there and you're using expanded plastics and you want to make a change from it, we've got a solution.
You need to solve individual cheese wrappers. My wife won't buy it for us.
Yes.
Because they go good on burgers.
Yep.
The cheddar or whatever it is.
Yep.
And she's like, no, because it's too much plastic. And I'm like, please, come on, James, fix that so I can go and buy individual cheese.
Well, if there were 3 areas, and this will be super quick, if there were 3 areas to focus on because mycelium right now is a lot of your, potentially replacing pulp packaging and expanded plastics and composite materials. And I would classify this as a material under chitin. So this is what seashells are made out of, hair's made out of, nails. That's also what mycelium is made out of. There's algae, seaweed. So I think seaweed is going to hold the solutions for the films. So things like you're talking about, I think that's the role, because mycelium won't fix every single problem. There isn't going to be a single solution. So yeah, algae, seaweed has massive opportunity in making films and other types of resins. And then the other broad area of material to add to mycelium and algae is cellulose. So things that come from woody-like materials. It's one of the most, chitin and cellulose are I think they're the two, or at least two of the most abundant forms of material on the planet. And it's like that alone being true. It's like regardless of it being sustainable or sexy or whatnot, I'm just like, why not look there to make our materials from these things? Cellulose makes sense, wooden table. We all know how to do it. Nature did all the hard work of gluing it together and making this material. And it's like, how can we just learn just to take 1% of how nature has done things over 1 billion years? And I think we're going to find solutions that, regardless of any need to, they will just be the best solutions to jump to. They'll be affordable, functional, and hopefully the sustainability aspect of it is just a cherry on top at the end of all of it.
Awesome, brother. Safe trip. Go save the world.
Thank you.
I offer you all my hope. No money. Go raise that somewhere else.
No, yeah. I have to make a tree that grows the stuff. Sometimes I feel like I've got more chance there. So,
thanks, brother.
Cheers.
This episode of A Beacon of Hope is proudly brought to you by Campfire Studios. Campfire Studios is an impact-led organisation amplifying the voices of Māori and Pasifika communities via podcasting and video content. To find out more, visit campfirestudios.co.nz. 2, 3, 4. Thank you for tuning in to this frequency of hope in our podcast today. If you found value from this episode and want to hear more, I would love it if you could follow, subscribe, and rate our show. By doing so, you will increase the frequency of the Beacon of Hope. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform, please take a moment to hit the follow or subscribe button and leave a rating and review. I truly appreciate your support and feedback, and it helps us make our podcast even better. Thank you.
Be good. Be safe. And be happy. Yeah. Sounds like that song, doesn't it? Be happy.
All right, Mama, we'll stop there, right?
Yeah, okay. All right.